All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to unpack a story that affects millions of us, the affordable housing crisis. And we're going to look at the really strange, paradoxical role banks have played in all of this, how they went from being, well, architects of the problem to the very institutions we've tasked with solving it. So, let's get into it.
You know, to really get where we are today, we have to start with a tough reality, and this quote says it all. The housing crisis we're living through wasn't some kind of accident. It was designed, intentionally, piece by federal policy.
And that brings us to the central kind of mind-bending question we're tackling today. How did the very same banking system that was used to systematically starve entire communities of investment become our primary tool for rebuilding them? I mean, how does that even happen?
To figure that out, we've got to go back, way back, to the beginning. Back to the policies that drew actual lines on a map. Lines that decided who could build wealth in America and who couldn't. So, before the 1930s, buying a home was, well, it was mostly a dream for the very wealthy. You needed these huge down payments. But the New Deal completely changed the game with the 30-year mortgage. Suddenly, homeownership was in reach for so many more people. But this amazing new opportunity, it came with a very dark side. A new government agency started drawing up maps that would create a legacy of discrimination for generations to come.
And that practice was called redlining. I mean, it's pretty literal. Government appraisers would draw red lines around neighborhoods where racial and ethnic minorities lived, and they'd label them hazardous. Now, this wasn't a suggestion, it was an instruction. It meant that if you lived inside one of those red lines, you were basically locked out of the new American dream of homeownership. No loan for you.
The impact of redlining was absolutely devastating, and we are still feeling it today. You see, these communities were just starved of investment, which led to these terrible cycles of poverty and really deep entrenched segregation. The massive racial wealth gap that we still talk about today, its roots are right here, in these maps.
Okay, so fast forward to the 1970s. The damage was just impossible to ignore. And this led to a pretty landmark law that was designed to undo all that harm, to force banks to reinvest in the very communities they had been told to ignore.
This was the Community Reinvestment Act, or the CRA, and the idea behind it was simple but really revolutionary. It basically said if a bank takes deposits from people in a community, it has an obligation to lend to that entire community, and that includes low and moderate income neighborhoods. It was a direct shot at the legacy of redlining.
So, the big question is, did it work? Did the CRA fix the problem? Well, it's complicated. Just take a look at these numbers. It shows something really interesting, which you might call great inflation. On paper, almost 90% of banks are passing their CRA exams with flying colors.
And that really makes you wonder, right? If pretty much everyone is getting a passing grade, is the test actually working? Is it really pushing for meaningful, on-the-ground change in these neighborhoods? And that gets to the real problem with the CRA. Critics say it often encourages banks to make these big, easy, indirect investments, like just buying up a bunch of municipal bonds, instead of funding direct, high-impact projects. I mean, why would they? Buying a bond is simple, it checks a box. Actually financing a new health clinic or affordable apartments, that's messy and complicated. So there's not a lot of accountability to make sure the money actually gets to the people who need it most. Plus, the rules are always changing, which creates this constant uncertainty.
So the CRA created a demand from banks to invest in communities, but it wasn't super efficient. So the market did what the market does. It came up with a much more efficient product to help banks meet that demand.
And that tool was the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, or LIHT. Since this program was created back in 1986, it has completely changed the game for affordable housing. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it is the single most important source of funding we have for building new affordable homes. Period.
So let's quickly walk through how this works, because it's a really smart public-private setup. First, the government gives these valuable tax credits to a developer. Second, the developer can't really use tax credits themselves, so they sell them to an investor, almost always a big bank that needs to meet its CRA goals. Third, the bank gets a huge benefit, a dollar-for-dollar cut on their federal taxes. And finally, the developer now has a big pot of cash to actually go out and build the affordable housing. It's a win-win-win.
And you can see just how powerful this program has been. I mean, look at that number. Over 3.7 million affordable homes have been built or preserved thanks to LAITC. It is an absolute engine for construction. But there's a pretty big catch.
Yeah. This incredible engine, it has a built-in flaw. You could even call it a ticking clock that's threatening to undo decades of all this progress.
And that ticking clock has a deadline.
2029. And here's why that date is so important. So scary, really. By the end of this decade, about half of all the affordable housing units ever built with this program could just vanish from the affordable market.
So here's the problem in a nutshell, that affordability was never meant to be permanent. The legal deals that keep the rents low on these properties, they usually expire after 30 years. And after that, the owner is totally free to flip them to market rate apartments. And right now, millions of those units are hitting that 30-year expiration date.
So what we have is a system that's great at creating housing, but a lot of that housing comes with an expiration date. And it gets even crazier, because it turns out there's an even bigger, more fundamental contradiction baked right into federal policy that limits any kind of solution. This slide just lays it out perfectly. It is this incredible push and pull of federal policy. On one side, you've got the CRA literally pushing banks, mandating that they invest in these communities. But at the same time, on the other side, you have these public welfare investment rules that are pulling back hard. They place a strict cap on those exact same investments, saying a bank can't invest more than 15% of its capital.
And so the end result is this system that is just completely at war with itself. We're telling banks, you must go solve this problem, while at the same time telling them, but you are not allowed to invest enough money to actually fix it. It's a total paradox.
Which leaves us with this one final, really important question. Look, we spent half a century trying to sort of reverse engineer a system of disinvestment into a system of investment. So if we were to just start over today from scratch, if we were to design a system without all these built-in contradictions, what would that even look like? That's the real challenge facing us right now.